So in the past, I've spoken at length about how trade route systems, etc., actually work and how they function within the context of the game and within your empire. There is sadly one thing that I feel is horribly missing at this stage, which is, well, the differentiation between internal and external markets, as well as the usability of the trade networks to move products from A to B. Now, that may be a little bit vague, and what do you actually mean by that, ASpec? Well, I actually mean the following by that. Of course, we got our trade routes, and this is how everything is moving, etc., which is nice. It'd be cool that if something is disconnected, we actually get a pop-up on the top of the screen. That's currently not the case, but that's not really what I want to suggest here. So, we have goods being moved around. We got our energy, we got our minerals, we got our consumer goods, our alloys, actually moving towards several locations in theory. It's all very much virtual. It's not really visualized in any way. Everything gets thrown onto a giant pile and then magically appears at the locations where it needs to go. And that by itself is fine. What I am, however, suggesting here is that using the trade network system, that we actually get a certain logistical approach of this. Now, this doesn't need to be particularly deep. For instance, let's say that a system is generating alloys or something like that, and the system itself does not have any shipyards in it. Those items obviously need to be moved from A to B. Now, why am I suggesting like this? Isn't the current system deep enough? Like, why would you want to do something like this? It makes certain systems, as well as trade routes, as well as overview of how this trade route works through possibly espionage, a lot more strategically interesting, as well as for low-level tactical decisions. Let's say, for instance, that you're attacking an enemy area and you need to push through to their systems. Now, usually what would happen is that you would have a shipyard relatively close to the front line, a couple systems deep and something like that, and pushing in through there to take those resources and potentially also intercepting any sort of alloys that are being delivered to these stations in order to start production on new ships. And I can go even further. So when it comes to capturing resources, I think is something that is rather important and that is currently missing from the game. Because right now, like I mentioned, they're all being thrown onto a giant pile, alloys in this particular case, and that right there, whilst I understand that it's important for gameplay reasons and make things a little bit more interesting, right now we're kind of getting to the point that Stellaris is slowly but steadily developing into a more empire-orientated scenario. And the thing with that is that it's a lot more internalized right now, and I like to see that a little bit different. For instance, I've also mentioned that we only have an internal system of trade routes. It'd be kind of nice to actually have these trade routes being externalized as well. Let's say we've got these aliens over here, and we would like to trade with them. How is that actually going to work? Are we going to set up trade routes with them? Do they need particular ways of getting resources from A to B? Are those resources going to arrive at a certain amount of time, or is it going to tick up after, say, 31 days, which is the average month within Stellaris? But yeah, for instance, goods. Let's say that we want to have a trade deal with some Xenos. So let's say that we have a trade deal here and we want to move some resources from A to B. How do those actually move? Where are they coming from? Where are those resources situated, etc.? Do we want to pile them up somewhere? Do we want to move them across the border through the trade system? Maybe. That'd be cool. But in addition, you could also have small models actually moving the goods, so you physically have something to attack. If you're, for instance, barbaric despoilers, you're raiding enemy territory, you're just going through here, running the gates, whatnot, and you're just jumping in there and trying to get trade and stuff like that. And that right there would make piracy also a lot more interesting, because right now, for instance, we have the piracy system. Hey, there's a piracy thing here, and pirates will spawn, but it'd be far more interesting to have little NPC ships going from A to B that the pirates could then attack and would physically impact your economy, because those ships have certain resources inside of them that they could have intercepted that you were shipping to somewhere else. And that would make the whole idea of patrol routes for your ships a lot more interesting. In addition, the patrol routes themselves could have random events attached to them, etc. But yeah, the trade system, I think this is a great system as it is right now, and I think it's a great base. But the problem right now that I'm having is that Paradox, in general, when it comes to making their expansions, and this is, of course, just an observation, this may not be true, this is all conjecture from my case, has a tendency to widen games rather than deepening them, which is something that I totally understand. You want to add new features to a game, you're kind of running a live service scenario here, and you want to add more stuff to the game, and that's fine. However, the idea of deepening the game makes things a lot more interesting, which is why I think that there should be more events for more things, such as these patrol routes, for instance, should have a lot more events attached to it. What is happening during these piracy patrol routes? Experience points, little events, pirate coves, so to speak, and whatnot, or even being able to hire them, or sending them across the border to raid other stuff, kind of like what the raiders currently do, but in a more practical sense. Internal raiders rather than external. We've already established that there is an internal and external market, and that right there is something that I find rather interesting. Maybe even freeing slaves, or capturing them. Who knows? That right there would make the mid-game a lot more interesting, because you're so focused on organizing your empire, dealing with border skirmishes, building up your rivalries with your neighbors, etc. And that right there, I think, could be the next step for deepening out the current mechanics that are in the game. And overall, you know, at some point, I would also like to see, for instance, like the gateways, right? So gateways right now, they are basically in space. So we got our gateway right here, and from a logistical point of view, stuff moves from A to B, right? Okay, that's fine. How about, you know, let's say, for instance, we have ourselves a planet, and we go to, say, Bernard Star, or something along those lines, if we can actually boot it up. So we go to Bernard Star. How about we get gateways on planets to move armies around a bit quicker? So, for instance, we build armies or put them inside of fleets, which is something that I would actually kind of like to see, is where modules for, say, cruisers or something like that, or battleships, where you have a module where you can just say, hey, this is a marine module, rather than having the old school drop squads that are part of a fleet, which I'm not a big fan of, and have them just jump from place to place using localized gateways. And that would also smoothen out population, because then you can just say, hey, this planet have people only living on it, and then they just go to the place of work on the other side of your space. Hypotheticals, of course. This is all whether or not this would work from a gameplay point of view is, of course, a little bit to be held up to conjecture. But yeah, you know, you can leave it at that. So what do you think? Trade systems right now. Of course, it's super hidden. It should be in the outliner, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to be the case sometime in the future. But how would this all develop? I think that the addition of logistic systems would be awesome adding to this. Not as deep, of course, as, say, Hearts of Iron, because that is a little bit too much, but fleshing out the depth of the current systems that are here and adding more things on top of that using the current interface would be great. And then, of course, widening out in the future. In all honesty, I'm kind of having trouble thinking by myself, okay, so once the diplomacy expansion is done, what do you really do? Where do you go from there? Overhauling military again? Sure, you can add more event packs, more crisis packs, that sort of stuff. But when it comes to large-scale expansionary stuff, where do you go from there? I'm curious. That's something that that is in the back of my mind. Hey, maybe we'll get another Fallen Empire expansion, something that Wiz was alluding to for quite some time. But yeah, we'll see. And then we're going to go wrap it up here. I would love to hear your ideas down in the comments as well about the trade and potentially the logistic systems and expanding on all of that, and how piracy would tie into that. And I think right there, that's something that would be pretty cool to see. But anyway, we're going to go wrap it up here. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take good care of yourselves, and, as always, each other.